This is Dr. Maureen O'Hara, and I wanted to go over a few things to help you when you're writing your dissertations. I've got this document that I'm going to scroll through here so that I can give you some tips. So the first thing I want to talk about is person. Be very clear when you are referring to a study from literature or your study. When you say this study and there's a citation nearby, then it becomes confusing if you're referring to your own study or the one from the literature. So call your study the dissertation study, and then that way it'll be clear for the reader. Same thing if you're talking about researchers or referring to yourself as a researcher. It can be confusing, especially if you have a citation nearby that's justifying why you're using a particular method. So refer to yourself as the investigator because you did get an IRB approval, which signifies that you are the principal investigator. In academia, it is understood not to mention the names of sources, journals, books, reports, and so forth in the body of the paper. Just put a citation, and then the reader can go to the reference list and find out the information. The other thing is that you do not need to say a study was conducted. Just about everything that's published is based on a study, so it's understood. One thing you need to be sure to change is the verb tense. So I've got this nice chart here, and I'm going to go over each one of these for you for the different tenses that need to be used in the different sections. Okay, so first of all, the past tense is used when referring to something that is completed and over and done. Otherwise, you would use the present perfect tense for something that was started in the past and continues in the present. So what's the present perfect tense? So it uses a helping verb with a participle such as have had. So Smith has had an experience with XYZ. You can use the present tense if something is the same now as it was in the past. So the normal range for hemoglobin A1C is 5.5% to 6%. So be sure you have changed all the tenses in the final paper. Chapter 1, you can use the present tense to talk about general information, and you can use the present perfect tense to talk about previous research. In Chapter 2, use the past tense when referring to completed studies. In Chapter 3, use the past tense to refer to the actions and procedures that you did. Use the present tense to refer to tables and figures. Use the past tense to refer to your data and analysis in Chapter 4. Use the present tense to refer to tables and figures. In Chapter 5, use the past tense to summarize the findings and refer to your completed research, and use the present tense to discuss implications of the findings, and possibly the future tense to make suggestions. Be sure that you change the proposed study or the current study to the dissertation study, and change the tense from anything you would do or will do for the proposal to the past tense for the dissertation study. The other thing is, remember about anthropomorphism, that studies can't calculate anything. The studies don't aim to do anything. Only people can do those kinds of actions. So refer to yourself as the investigator. The investigator calculated the findings to be XYZ. Just want to remind you that if your dissertation is going to be bound, then the left margin is 1.5 inches and all other margins are 1 inch. If it's not going to be bound, then the left margin can be 1 inch also. If you need to drop the chapter identifier, then you can use the before spacing. Remember that all tables, figures, and appendices need to fit within the margins. So when you go to set up your paper, make all the settings 0, check off this box, and then use none for centering titles and level 1 headings. Use it for the level 2 heading as well. Use first line to indent the paragraph 1/2 inch. Use the hanging indent with 1/2 inch for the reference list, and then you would use the hanging indent for 1/4 inch with paragraphs in a series that I will go over later. There's really no reason to change any of these settings here except with rare occasion, and do not have any setting here for before or after because it'll put in an extra line between the paragraphs. Okay, with punctuation, there's 1 space after commas, colons, and semicolons. Most manuscripts that are published have 1 space after the period between sentences. Your program may have different ideas, so you may need to check on that. Periods and commas go inside quotation marks, and if you're using quotation marks, the double quotation marks are used first, and the single quotation marks are used inside the double quotation marks. If you have an ellipsis, there's a space before, after, and in between the dots. So space there, the dot, the space, dot, space, dot, space. If the ellipsis is the end of the sentence, then you can put a period at the end to signify the end of the quoted material, or the material that was left out. Okay. With dashes, in APA style, they do describe it in the book, but they really should only be used to separate titles and subtitles in the reference list. Don't use dashes in the body of the paper. Really, the dashes are used for emphasis, and that would be in humanities writing or English composition, not in scientific writing. If you have parentheses, we cannot have parentheses back to back. So instead of that, we put all the information in one set of parentheses, and then there is a semicolon to separate the information from the citation, for example. And we cannot have parentheses inside parentheses, so this is the occasion when we would use the brackets for the abbreviation. And then the other rule with the brackets is for the confidence interval, that here they're used alone. Notice how there's the parentheses are used here with the statistics, but these are not all enclosed in parentheses. If you have quotations, refer you to page 92. If you're going to have a quotation in a sentence, it has to be 39 words or less. If the quoted material is 40 words or more, then a block quotation is used. Be sure to have the page number or the paragraph number where the quotation is located. And here's an example of a quotation in a sentence. Notice how I've got the P period for the page designation. And if you have a block quote, then it's indented 1/2 inch. This side is not justified, it's ragged, so you don't need to change the margin for this side. There's a period at the end of the quoted material, and then you have the citation. Here I put in the abbreviation for paragraph so you could see how that was done. As I mentioned with brackets, the only time they're used in a sentence is for the confidence intervals. Otherwise, they're used inside parentheses. Enumeration, there's vertical and horizontal enumeration. So horizontal is elements in a series, which is 3 items or more. If you have 2 items, then you cannot enumerate. You need to just list the 2 items. So APA uses the letters and AMA uses the numbers. And enumeration is helpful with long phrases and statistical information, but really not needed with lists that only have 1 word or just a few words in each grouping. And for the vertical, I'm going to go over that when I talk about paragraphs in a series and bullets. Okay, so if you're going to list information, there's only a few ways you can do that. Outlining is not used in APA style, and bold is only used for headings in the body of the paper. If you want to list anything vertically, like definitions of terms or research questions, there is only 3 ways to do that. No underlining is used in APA style because it looks like a hyperlink. So the first method is using the levels of the headings. So here I've got a level 2 heading for the definition of terms, and then I've got the level 3 headings here for the explanation of my term. So the first word is capitalized and there's a period there, and then I've got the explanation in a full sentence. The second way is to use paragraphs in a series, which I really like because of their flexibility. A paragraph can be one word, a phrase, a sentence, or multiple sentences, and you can also use bullet points for the subpoints if you need. So you're going to indent the enumeration 1/2 inch. There's a period, 2 spaces. First word is capitalized. There's a period at the end of the term, and then you can have an incomplete sentence or a complete sentence. More than one. You can have just one, 2 or more. And then be sure to have a citation when you're doing your definition of terms, for example. The third way is to use bullets. Bullets are formatted similarly to paragraphs in a series. It's indented 1/2 inch. The first word is capitalized. There's a period at the end, and then you have the explanation that follows. If you're going to have the points and subpoints, I think it's easier to list the points first and then go back and put in the subpoint. Otherwise, you need to manipulate this one to come out to the 1/2 inch mark. There's no other way to list things vertically in APA style. If you want to emphasize anything, there's only 2 ways to do that, which is with quotation marks or with italics. There's no underlining in APA style. Bold is only used for headings in the body of the paper, and full caps are only used in the running heads that are not used in dissertations. So after the phrases have been introduced, then the italics or quotation marks are not used again in the rest of the paper. So see page 91 for the quotation marks. Like the example here is normal behavior. So after this introduction, then normal would not be in quotation marks again. And then here's the example with italics. The box was labeled empty, and then after that it would not be in italics again. One thing I did want to mention is that we do use italics for anchors of scale. Okay, tables and figures are described in chapter 5 in the APA book, and also you can see pages 52 and 53 for some examples. Tables are formatted in the floating configuration without any grid lines, and then notice the capitalization of the headings and the subheadings. There's no bold, there's no colors. The title of the table and the table identifier are above the table, and any explanation is below the table. So here's the table identifier with the title of the table. This is one place where you can use single spacing, and also you can change the font from 12 point to 10 point to make it fit on the page. Notice how only the first word's capitalized here, and that these headers are centered over the information. And then here's the explanation. The note is in italics, and then the rest of it is not. The easiest way to format tables is to use the word formatting tool, and each piece of data needs to be in its own cell. You can leave the grid lines in, and then at the end you can take them out and put in the lines for the header and the bottom of the table. So here's the example that I had from above with all the grid lines in, so I can center things and move things around, and then here's the notation underneath. Tables are all labeled in sequential order in the body of the paper, starting with table 1, If there are tables in the appendix, then they're labeled as appendices and not as tables. Just a reminder that a table must fit on one page. There's some good examples in the book on pages 146 to 148 for continuing to the next page, but I copied this out of the book. So here's the floating head right here. When you get to the bottom of the page, then what happens is you put continued at the bottom. There's no line, you just put continued. Then when you move to the next page, you have to put in the floating head again, and then you can continue with the rest of your table. I cut this off, that's why the bottom line is missing here. Figures are different in formatting from tables. So anything that doesn't fit into that floating format is considered a figure. So graphs and pictures and drawings are all figures. Also, when you generate your bar graphs and those sort of things from the SSPS, those are also figures. So each figure is labeled sequentially in the body of the paper, starting with figure 1. So here's my figure here. Here's my figure identifier. This is the title of the figure, and then this is the explanation that goes with it. Notice how there is I put this in single space. This is one of the exceptions where you can use single space. Then I've got a single space here, and then I've got the double space resuming with the next section. So if you're going to have adapted material, the citation is different from an in-text citation or the reference list. So I listed them here for you. So if you're going to have an article adapted from a journal, then you have adapted from and the title of the article. Notice how it's all capitalized and it's in quotation marks with the author and the title of the journal, the publishing information, copyright date, name of the publisher. If you have a book, you say adapted from the title of the book. Notice how it's all in italics and they're all capitalized. If you've got volumes and editions, you can put those here, and then the page number where you're adapting it from goes here. And then you have the names of the authors and the location, name of the publisher, the copyright information. If you have a chapter in a book, it's adapted from title of the chapter, it's all capitalized, it's got quotation marks. Then you've got the chapter authors, then you have the title of the book with the publishing information and the copyright information. If you have an article from a web page, then it's all capitalized. This is different than the reference list. It's in quotation marks. It's got the name of the author, the URL address, and the copyright information. If you have adapted something with permission, then you can use this language here, adapted with permission, and then adapted from, and the name of the article, just like it is in this one here. If you have appendices, the only thing that has to be in APA style is the appendix identifier and the title of the appendix. Notice how it's double spaced, it's centered, there's no bold. Then the rest of it can be anything. It doesn't have to be in APA style. Each appendix is labeled A, B, and C, and each appendix starts on a separate page. And if you have consent documents or letters, these can be converted to PDF and then inserted into the page like a picture. So I hope you find that helpful. If you have any questions, you can email me at omaureen@nova.edu, or you can call me 3 p.m. to midnight Eastern, 323-222-6454. Here, I put this in writing here for you, for those of you who are visual learners like myself. So, good luck on your dissertation.